What's up? What's up? What's up? What's up? What's up? Webbs, are you there? Can you hear?
Oh my God, it was on my side, dude.
Oh, indeed, indeed.
It was freaking Boom. I love Boom. It's a great program for like boosting sound and like controlling different levels. But every once in a while and far too often, it will just stop working, not tell you that it's not working, take away your sound, and you have no idea why. It wasn't until the video started to play and I couldn't hear that either. I'm like, wait a minute, maybe this is on my side. Sure enough, I shut down Boom, switched back to my Yeti microphone, and it's fine.
Bada bing, bada bing. It is the Thursday night hustle, or should we say Monday, Friday Eve, Monday. Oh, don't want to go that far in the future. Friday Eve session for Hoodlum Cultured, and yeah, it's been an interesting week. Lots of weird stuff, like the weird news of people hating people for no reason. Like it's a little tiresome, but what can you do? What can you do? But
Indeed.
try to make sure that we teach kids to be tolerant and empathic to other people because like everybody wants to be loved and not killed generally. I think also there
Yeah.
needs to be a commitment to ensuring that every student in America receives a an education that highlights the contributions of every uh, ethnic group, gender, whatever, to the American fabric and why that's important, and not just leaving that to chance. Because I think I definitely feel a lot of. I don't want to say the education is at fault here, but if we look at how our education landscape is, it is a very Eurocentric model in which other individuals are either looked at as um, speed bumps on the road to the success of America or as non-contributors. So I don't know,
I,
Wes.
I think also there is, because there's such a focus on like white people history, there's like a fetishization of other cultures that's also inappropriate.
I could see that. I could see that. But indeed, we're gonna call this.
Starting on a bright note today.
I mean, yeah, it's just it gets tiresome, right? Because I mean, really, our school. So I teach at the school in my day job. That's is a brown school, and I very much try to highlight the contributions of non-white people on a daily basis to say you belong in America too. You can contribute, you can thrive, you can help people. You should be nice to everybody, but again, there's nothing wrong with you being in America and being a success. And I think that unfortunately, that doesn't happen in the general curriculums that we either compose ourselves or we purchase and teach. Those things again are uh, you either have to be very conscious of what you're teaching and realize that there's certain things that are severely lacking in those curricula, and you have to go and infuse those things in there. But I think it's very tiresome to have to be consciously vigilant. You know what I'm saying? To always have that in the top of your head. It's a very tiresome situation. And to be quite frank, I'm tired of it myself. Like it's been
There
17
was
years.
a conversation hosted by a friend of the show, Dr. Terry Cullen, on Twitter. It was the Nevada Ed Chat, and the question that she asked was, "Can you?" It was something along the lines of like, highlight what's a story you feel needs to be told more or discussed more, or something along those lines. And I'm going to admit that I actually struggled to think of something at first. I'm like, yeah, what is a story that needs to be told? Because a lot of the things that my brain came up with were cliche.
Mm.
And it wasn't until I was driving the next day that it like hit me. Oh yeah, there's this story and this story and this story. Like one of the ones I thought of was Buffy St. Marie. That is a story that I don't know that I know gets referenced a lot. You recently introduced me to uh, Snotty Nose Res Kids.
Yep.
And for some reason, like there's a lyric in one of their songs about Buffy St. Marie, which then some other something I was reading or listening to mentioned Buffy St. Maria. It's like that's a story that's not told. Also, a while back, there was a video I watched about the history of Hawaii. I don't think Taco Dog's watching, but um, and the essentially like the U.S. colonization of Hawaii and how they like got rid of the Native Hawaiian leadership, and also a story that I feel like needs to be told more because it's awful. Like the way that they and the folks in companies in particular who went there and like installed their own leadership so that they could control the resources on the island. And that same story is told throughout history where white community or white countries go in and take over brown countries, and it's garbage.
I mean, one of the coolest things that I get to do on a daily basis is doing the stream show now forced me to kind of think about format. And so we have a women's history maker of the day, and it's really cool to introduce kids to people that they would never, even if they had the opportunity to choose, they would never. So Luisa Moreno, and Luisa Moreno is like pre Cesar Chavez. She's like in the 1930s, and found a really cool clip of about Luisa Moreno. And again, most of my students are brown, and the majority of those brown students are of Latin descent. In talking even to the kindergartens about why unions happen, why people fight for workers' rights, et cetera, et cetera. And look at this lady from Guatemala who was a rich lady, a journalist in Mexico eventually, who decided to come to America and say, look, you know, it's messed up how you guys are treating people, seamstress. And she went all over the country. This is before Cesar Chavez, before Doris Huerta, all over the country organizing things. And America deuced her out. They sent her back. They said, you got to go. They sent her back to, she ended up dying in Guatemala. It was interesting though to be able to like uh, prick the kids' imaginations to say that these people existed and offer them that 5 6 minutes. We've done Althea Gibson, we've done Dolores Huerta, we've done uh, very interesting professor. Actually, went to the University of Michigan. Dr. Joel Cobb. She was really African American lady. Was really integral in women getting professorships in colleges, and she was like really, really integral in that. So it's really cool to go and have kids. Um, First of all, do the research yourself. Have to go search out and find different people that you might even be totally like familiar with, because that has been the most like it's been cool to kind of it's been cool to go and find the people that I know of, and then tangentially they'll say, "Hey, if you're really interested in this person, this is another person that hung out with this person." You're like, "Oh man, let me go read this person," and you end up going through these hours of research. Like this person's really really important to all these other things. I mean, a thing talking about Native Americans, like Joan Baez and a lot of the stuff. Going and looking at, she had her last tour was 2019, I want to say, and it's very cool PBS piece. If you have a chance to go and watch it, cool PBS piece in which she talks about losing her voice and stuff, and how like singing is this different thing. It's a real cool little interview. I didn't use it because it was long. It's like a 17-minute interview or whatever. But Joan Baez has always been a cool, and like I've never been a folk person, but Joan Baez has been. She was at the March on Washington, like all these historic places. Joan Baez has been around for a long time and seen a lot of really cool stuff. And speaking about Asian Americans, if you want a cool story to express to your students, the documentary is on YouTube. You have to pay for it, which you should pay for because it's a great documentary. Grace Lee Boggs from Detroit, or she lived, ended up selling in Detroit. Grace Lee Boggs was a Chinese American who married a black guy and became part of the Black Power movement. Crazy cool documentary on her life. She just passed a couple years ago. Very cool. Oops. Very cool. Super interesting. Just a super interesting documentary, and it's well worth your time if you're interested in like looking at how identity and just the idea of being fair happens, and as soon as the Asian hate started to pop off, I thought of Grace Lee Boggs immediately. And she's a great example. This is totally off the topic for the show tonight, but whatever. Great example of a person who had the empathy to look at everyone's struggle. Her husband, Jimmy Boggs, also a very interesting person. They hung out with Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and stuff. Really, really, she died like 100 years old, I want to say. But Grace Lee Boggs is a very interesting American that I think every kid should know of her existence and what she did. This is a person that was born in China, immigrated to the United States, became part of one of the blackest cities at the time. Well, I guess Detroit's still one of the blackest cities in America. Married a black guy and became part of the Black Power movement. I think that is totally a weird and very intriguing story to kind of look through. So I forget what the name is. Revolutionary something is the name of the documentary, but it's well worth your time when you watch it.
Back over the summer, maybe it was a couple weeks ago. I don't have a good sense of time. At some point, we were talking to a friend of the show, Bianca Woodard, who is a history, I almost said professor. She could be a professor, history teacher. And one of the things that she said that really stuck out to me was that we don't often teach history with context. Like, it was mind blowing when I got to be an adult and learned things like, here's who hung out with Martin Luther King, or here's who hung out with, I don't know, Mark Twain, or, you know, other famous people like, who was I thinking of? Like, the relationship between like Plato and Socrates and just all kinds of like, there's no context. You learn about this one person in isolation, and it's hard to put those pieces together. Or like things that happened during the Civil War, or things that happened during these big, huge, monumentous, like worldly events that were also going on in other countries. Like, I know my education was severely lacking in like most of West Asian history. It was very focused on like European history, not surprising. But having that context of other things that were happening at the same time, that context is super important. Anyway, what's the topic of the show? We were so troubleshooting problems I thought were yours that were really mine that I don't even know what we're going to talk about tonight.
Indeed. We're going to deal with Schlechter Never Lies. And one of the I think Phil Schlechter, he's not a super genius, but he's pretty close in terms of the simplicity of the ideas related to the plausibility of the ideas, right? Now, we're not talking about soup changing. Oh my goodness, we have to change how everything works. It's like these are very simple shifts that if we just thought about this differently, perhaps education would benefit phenomenally. So we're going to kind of, with the ask a software developer question, how do you approach working with customers in your day job? I mean, is there like, hey, I know better than the customer knows? Is there a situation that you're constantly conversing with the customer? Is there an assumptions made about the customers without conversing with them? Like, how does that dynamic work in which you're trying to stay employed and make money as the goal?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like I say that every time. So I'm going to take this from the perspective of like my days being a like more customer facing app side developer. In particular, there's one project I was on where there was a lot of like customer interaction, and by customer I mean like product owner. So the person who is responsible, or project manager, I guess, for the implementation of the product. Because I think it can be like sort of multiple steps. There's the end user, who is the person who uses your product, right? But then there's also like the customers and the client you're making the thing for their customers. And it's interesting because I've even experienced this a little bit in education. It's interesting the tug of war sometimes between what the project manager or product owner thinks the customer wants versus observing what the customer actually does in their behavior and then making choices based on that. So you can kind of like, you can assume, oh, the customer would want a green button, or the customer would want, 50 steps to go through all these options as they go through the flow to buy a product. But then when you actually watch the customer work, and you see that, 5 steps in, they get tired and they quit and they leave their shopping cart and don't actually purchase anything, that's really informative. Like, and sometimes even the customer can tell you this is what I want, but then when you watch their behavior, it's like a different story. So they don't even realize what they actually like want or what their behavior tends to be. Um, it's very much about like having that conversation though, and making sure that your customer is aware of the trade-offs of certain decisions. If you're talking about like creating a product, and also capturing, like I said, what they think they want versus what you observe of their behavior. And I think you even have a little experience in this, right?
Yeah, I mean, when I was intern with a certain Fortune 500 company, it was very interesting coming in. So I did not have a business background in undergraduate school. I was a sociology major, and that actually was the attractive thing for this Fortune 500. Again, sociology is the study of groups and group dynamics, which, unlike psychology, looks at the one's cohort, one's, again, contemporaries who you're kicking it with or whatever, right? And so being able to go and look at groups of individuals in a artificial situation, they set up a they set up a supermarket and just watch people. My job was to sit there and watch people shop, and like, oh, okay, interesting. This type of person tends to gravitate to this stuff, and these people tend to do this and whatnot. And it was getting analysis from a different point of view. And I think that's another thing that kind of, as we go through this episode, this is why teaching in isolation is such a damaging thing, because suddenly you only have one person's perspective from which to see things. And it gets really, like, I think confirmation bias creeps in there often. It's never oh, it wasn't me, it was them. They're the ones that have the problem, instead of there being a conversation amongst a lot of stakeholders in the same system saying, yeah, I did. Not that anyone is to blame in terms of you are a bad person, but hey, perhaps we can go and if we tried this here and move this thing around, and you notice when kid X said this was the reaction from the, then you have a situation in which we can look at the work in a more holistic manner rather than saying, I am the one teacher, there are 30 kids, I am infallible, these people are, it becomes this, like, the power dynamics become problematic.
I have two good stories related to that. One is I'm constantly preaching how much I love pairing, right? Not that I like talking to people all day long, but when I'm doing work, I super find it beneficial to have a second set of eyes. So I've been stuck on this problem for another project. That's for another time. That's not important. But I've been stuck on this one particular problem for this coding project, and I realized like the smart thing to do is bring in a pair, right? So I asked my one colleague, like, hey, do you mind if you have a few minutes at the end of the day? Would you help me look at this problem? And he's like, yeah, sure, because he's awesome. And so we, I pop up my screen share and hey, this is the problem I'm trying to solve. What do you think? What do you think? Well, and we went through a couple things, and he's like, well, have you opened the ports for that yet? And I'm like, oh, no, I didn't. It was like a really obvious answer, but I was so stuck in the weeds about like what the issue was. That was a solution I hadn't even thought about. Now that didn't solve the problem, but it got us one step closer to the problem. And eventually we did get to where I'm like, I'm pretty sure I know what the answer is now that I've talked through it and we like looked up a few different things, but I had a person to talk to like get that out. My second story is I'm on this for day job, me, one other person, and it was around like writing out naming conventions, like making sure all of our stuff has a consistent way of being named, which is really important when you're creating like hundreds of resources and you need to be able to search for them and stuff like that. So did all that work, whatever. Today it happens to come up like we needed to name a new thing. And one of our colleagues who hadn't looked at a list of ways that we had input. It would make more sense if we went this way because based on this other resource and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's a great idea. Like, he offered solid criticism of the way that we opted to do things, but I didn't take offense to it. Like, it's not as though he is apart my work and a good enough job. Like, no, that was, he has more experience than I do. He has a broader context of things. So it makes sense. He's something that I didn't see. And that's not a problem. Like, it's totally fine. I could totally see a situation where if you're not used to, having someone look at something and say, hey, here's a way you can improve it, it feels like a very negative criticism. And like your knee-jerk reaction to it, at least that's why this is the way I was when I first started in tech and was getting a lot of criticism I wasn't used to, was to be defensive about it and be like, no, there's nothing wrong with my work. Why are you criticizing my work? But like, the whole idea is we're working to make the thing better, and he has different experiences, and it's not because my work wasn't good. It was totally fine for what I knew at the time. So like, I don't know. I think that's a hard thing though. This is the thing you have to kind of train your to not like act in a defensive way when gives you critique on your work.
Well, I think that's also where you have to go and look at it, look at the frame, the the criticism that you want differently, right? Instead of saying, "What do you think about this? What's wrong with it?" I'm already stealing myself up, or you're going to say that these things are problematic. What is wrong with this thing? Now, I'm looking for you to go and dissect this thing as harshly as possible because I want to make the product better. The issue to me isn't, you know what? I always do perfect work. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand this to Webbs for her to give me confirmation that I'm just amazing and I never make mistakes. If that is the point, then I'm not looking for to improve. I'm looking for this pat on the head like you're an amazing person. And if you always pat me in the head and say I'm an amazing person, you're not the person that I need to be sharing my work with. I want my work to be critically analyzed so I improve. And if it's not critically analyzed so I improve, then I go into my perception of myself and my abilities might be warped. So when I give that work to a paying client or a different person, they say, "What? Like you've been getting away with this garbage for like 5 years? This doesn't work. That doesn't work. This other thing doesn't work." You know, I think it's easier to and get Paul Arden in his book is his first book. The second book is pretty good. It's not as good as the first book, so it's not as good as you want. Is how good you want to be. It's not how good you are. It's how good you want to be. Is the name of the book. But in that book, that's essentially what he says. Like, tell me what's wrong with what I did, not tell me what's good with it, because I can assume that I thought everything was good with it. That's why I produced it. Right? It was all good. So give me the opposite. Give me the critical friend, and I like that term far better than, oh, this is somebody. Nah, I want a critical friend that's going to look at this stuff and say, Mike, I love you. That part sucked. We need to improve on this. Change the color scheme here. That was hard to read. That gives me a little bit more insight to possibly improve my product. Just keeping it 100. All right, so that's from last week. The first topic is say less. And if you are a pop culture fan, especially in the hip hop pop culture, and you've overheard people say less fan. And say less does not mean like say less essentially means I understand what you're talking about, fam. Like you don't have to continue to run your mouth. I got it. We good. All right. And I think one of the most interesting parts of the 21st century pedagogy is people are trying to say more rather than cutting stuff back and saying less, right? And allowing the worker to do the work. And that's where we're going to go first, Webbs. So, that's the wrong one. That's what we want to work on.
I think sometimes that's a hard thing to do because there's a this idea that the more assignments there are, the more hours you put in, whatever, that's a measure of how well you're doing. But that's not necessarily the case. Like, because that was something I really struggled with when I was in the classroom and I started shifting more of an effort to my students, was like, I feel guilty. I feel guilty that they're doing all this work and I'm not. but really like they are there to do the work. Like they are there to you know, do the practice. So why should I feel bad about that?
So this is Phil Schlechte, and again, Phil Schlechte is the dude. All this stuff is freely available at their website. So it's schlechtecenter.app.box.com. If you just go to their website, the Schlechte Center, you're going to see all this stuff. And I want to say this is 10, 12, 13 years ago. This work on the work idea was one of the things that was pushed by the Clark County School District, but quickly abandoned, unfortunately. Um, but this is definitely a way to start to think about, and this is not something he built for 21st century framework. It's not 21st century pedagogy. It's not, hey, how to do, but this is a framework that works very, very well in terms of how to build your Canvas courses, how to do your Google Classroom stuff, how to do all the stuff that you're talking about. Like the work is important for the workers to do. One would assume you're the teacher because you can read, you can do basic mathematics, you could send emails, you have a modicum of skills. And so just 6 ideas. The first one being that this is why I asked Webbs that question for the Ask a Software Developer, right? Students are customers, volunteers, and knowledge workers. What they have to volunteer is their attention and commitment. So attention and commitment is what we want from our students. How exactly do we do that? And we've looked at the Schlechte's idea about engagement previously, with that idea that engagement is, I would do this even outside of school hours. I am passionate about this. You made this very attractive for me. I'm going to make it do what it do. Second, the primary role of teachers is that of designing engaging work for students and guiding them to the sources of instruction that need to be they need to be successful to do this work. Designing is the operative word in the sentence, right?
I think that like this is again, shout out to my alma mater, Eastern Michigan University. I don't know what other programs for education were like, but they had us designing content and curriculum based solely on standards and whatever information we could find. Like it was ground up, you were designing whole units, lessons, whatever. There was no, oh, I'm just going to use the teacher's manual, or oh, I'm just going to use this curriculum that was provided me. Like we had to create that content. And I think that's part of the reason that I was a pretty decent teacher. Hey, Taco Dog. Is because I had that hey, design it from scratch experience.
But I think that you cannot take number 2 outside of the context of number 1, right? So the design has to come from the understanding of your customer, your volunteer, your knowledge worker. You designing something that nobody wants is pointless. So if I have a scenario in which this is valuable to me, but not valuable to my customer, my volunteer, my knowledge workers, then suddenly I have a product that has no market. I've taken my time, and I think that's one of the places that as teachers we get offended, right? I worked hard, I put all this stuff together, and they didn't get it because I didn't care nothing about that. That was something that was valuable to you, but it wasn't valuable to your customer, your volunteer, or your knowledge worker.
I think I've shared the story before, but I'll share it again. When I was doing my training, when I first joined ThoughtWorks, one of the things that we did was we worked. We had like a fake product owner. We had to create a product for them, etc. So the first week that we get put into our teams, you know, we're given this basic website. We're supposed to follow along with whatever the product owner is requesting of us and create those features. And I remember one of my teammates spent the entire weekend like redoing the visual part of the entire website, like made it really attractive, super sexy, looked really nice. And when it was presented to the product owner was like, why are you wasting time on this? This is not a thing that I care about. This is not important to me. And yeah, so the product owner is really upset. So what we thought would be valuable from an aesthetic perspective turns out that like the product owner wanted no part of that. So you have to make sure that what you're doing aligns with what your end user actually wants, whether you think it's the best thing or not in some cases.
Absolute facts. So again, I mean, I worked hard on a situation that's great in a vacuum, but contextually, you working hard on something has nothing to do with you being successful at anything, right? If it does not align to the values of your customer, then suddenly you wasted a whole bunch of person hours doing nothing. Number three, differences in the level and type of engagement affect directly the efforts that students expend on school-related tasks. We've looked at those levels before, and again, it's on Schlechte's website. If you look for engagement on Schlechte's website, you will see the 5 levels of engagement as he or his researchers or his team have put together. And that is very important to remember if I want a person to do work outside of school, to be very passionate about this thing. Open-ended ideas where I can bring some of myself to projects, probably things that are going to attract people to their work. If you start to predetermine people's pathways to success, suddenly you're going to have individuals who are not going to be very happy. And as teachers, we hate that as well, right? You tell me I have to teach the curriculum and this fidelity to the curriculum. No one wants fidelity to the curriculum because now you've eliminated my own contributions to my classroom, right? You have eliminated me as the curator of the learning experiences in the room, and you're saying that Houghton Mifflin or wherever else curriculum you're getting from has a better understanding of my students than I do. Problem. So the same is true for you as a teacher. Go ahead, Webbs.
I think this also applies to the workplace. So I'm going to share a blog post that I wrote on my website about how Schlechte's levels of engagement can be used in the workplace. So it includes like links to the things that Mike's talking about, and then also specifically talks about, and I think this would apply not only to adult learners or adult participants and things, but also to kids. Like some of the things that I talked about were avoiding control and compliance and opting for drive. Doing shared visual notes, setting the purpose for whatever it is you're doing so that it's clear, like, hey, this is where we're headed. Please enjoy the ride.
But also, and I had a good conversation yesterday with a good friend of mine. People don't want choices. People want choice. So giving people 17 choices, nope. I'm going to give you a choice here. I'm going to keep the cognitive load low, but still give you the opportunity to be creative, right? So it's not about, okay, you can turn in this and this and this and this and this and this. Like the choice board. Let's have 35 choices. Yeah, slow down, B. Let's keep the choices narrow, but the creativity and imagination high. In these different components, these different structures, I can go and I can iterate and ideate and play around and create something that's my own rather than have 35 different flavors, which now I've got the mental freeze of which one do I choose? Do I do this one? 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 Keep it narrow, but depth. It was so the whole promise of the Common Core was depth, and that has not been held up, right? It's still this coverage. Get it done, get it done, rather than saying less is more. If I'm very, very, I'm steeped in this particular part of American history and I understand the context and understand it's better that we stay there for 2 months than we did it for half an hour because we had to cover all of our American history curriculum by the end of the school year. Because is anyone going to be I don't know if there's anybody who knows every aspect of American history. It's too complex of an idea. So to even attempt to say we are suddenly going to be all, anthropologists in fourth grade is kind of a silly situation, right? All right. So number 4, effort affects learning outcome as much as does intellectual ability. Again, none of these things are in a vacuum. So they're not. Number 4, if we go from number 4 and look at number 3, right? How do I get someone to work very hard at something? It has to be something that I'm engaged with first. If it's not something engaging, my effort is going to correlate to my lack of interest in that topic. And the fact that you just did, this is you're talking about the history of ice cream cones, and I've already told you that I'm not interested in ice cream, but you continue to run ice cream down my throat or whatever it is. So my effort is going to correlate with my engagement. And I like the fact that Webb's, it says my effort in my intellectual ability, both of those things contribute to my ability to be successful. Not just, okay, I'm a genius, and it doesn't matter that I'm not teaching to my SLD kids and my special ed kids, my autism kids, because those kids bust their butts too when they're very engaged in the topics. Go ahead, Webs.
Do you know what this reminds me of? When we talked to Victoria Rose, this actually I think was over the summer, maybe when we were doing the Be Bored Be Creative series. So we talked to Victoria Rose. She and I went to high school together, and she makes puppets and worked on the movie Coraline and a few other really cool projects. But she talked about, and I'll share the link in the comments of wherever you're watching. But she talked about failing out of pastry school, chef school, or whatever, like culinary school, and how she was really determined to be a puppeteer. And she kept going to, and I'm probably like mistelling the story a bit, but like she kept going to professors in college and like, I wanted to be a puppeteer. They're like, no, that's a dying profession. Like, you can't do that. And people kept telling her, no. And one of the things she said that really has stuck with me is, she's like, I wasn't the best person at this thing. Like, I wasn't some kind of prodigy at it, but I was determined to be good. And I put the time and the effort in, and I got to a level where I am really good at what she does. And now she makes like prototypes for things and stuff. It's really cool. And I will share the link, and all of her like social media stuff is in there. She's super interesting to follow.
So, I mean, again, when people start talking about, oh, well, he's special ed, or he's on the autism spectrum, or she's this, or whatever, again, the coolest kids to work with a lot of times are our special ed kids, because their perspective is going to be totally different from a lot of the mainstream ed kids a lot of times, and they will approach a project from a different lens that benefits everyone in the class. I love having our special ed kids, mainstreamed in those regular ed courses, because it pushes kids to look at their own how they reconcile the world in different ways, I guess. All right. Number 5, the level and type of engagement will vary depending on the qualities teachers build into the work they provide students. The qualities teachers build into the work. Webbs, what do you think that means from your perspective?
The qualities, the level and type of engagement vary depending on the qualities teachers build into the work they provide students. This reminds me of what's the thing that I talk about all the time?
Octalysis.
Octalysis. Yes, this reminds me of octalysis, like the different qualities and aspects of the work that make it interesting. Like, how much creativity is involved? How much choice do I have? Is there any consequence? Is there a time on it? Is there, do I get some social aspect out of it? Do I get to customize it in some way so that it's interesting and personalized to me? Like, that's what comes to mind immediately when I read this, is like, what aspects of the octalysis framework are you hitting on that will then up the level of engagement for me?
I would 150% agree. I also think that I love the language they use, right? Because the language...
In what aspect?
So, designing engaging work. Expend on school-related tasks. Effort affects learning outcome. It's written in very non-traditional, using non-traditional vocabulary for at least K-12 environments, right? Because the last one to me is the most powerful. And I'm glad he ends it. First of all, having 6 is weird, right? We usually stop at 5, 3, 7, 6, weird number. So for the first thing, that's what I like in the first place, right? But therefore, given all the other conditions, all the other 5 things that are there, therefore, teachers can directly affect student learning through the invention of work that has those qualities that are most engaging to students. The invention of work. That is like the sexiest thing, I think, that's on all 6 of these ideas. The idea that teacher as designer and inventor is what is called for. And this document is old. This is not 2020. This was something that was back in the I want to say I became aware of Schlechte like 2009, something like that. So this is a decades old plus concept. The idea of inventing work. As a software developer, is that a concept that as things develop, that if I was someone who could invent work or invent scenarios, that would be something that would be a an asset to a company or an asset to me as an entrepreneur?
Oh, absolutely. Like, I mean, entrepreneurially, you have to invent ways of doing things all the time, right? And I think too, invention means I find new routes to solutions. It doesn't just mean like, oh, I've created the post-it note. It means like thinking of solutions that someone else may not have thought of, or possibly putting together existing pieces or coming to a conclusion that maybe your team hasn't gotten to yet.
Yeah, I mean, if you went
And
to
for
the average teacher and you said, "Hey, do you invent lessons?" What do you think that person would like? How do you think that person would react?
I feel like they would laugh because they think that that's uh eh, that is a what do you call it? What's the word I'm looking for? When it's like very extreme, not parabola, not paralysis. It's not
Hyperbolic.
not prophetic. It is hyperbolic. That's still not the word I quite want, but I can't think of what the word I want is. Hyperbolic will work. Yeah, it's hyperbolic. Like, no, I don't invent anything. I just write some stuff. Like I write some lesson plans. But what is writing? Writing is inventing, right? It's inventing, putting things together, whatever. Also, I think that there are probably teachers who think I just use whatever curriculum they gave me. So I'm just a conduit. I would wonder actually how many teachers have dissatisfaction because they just feel like a middle person for
Right.
content delivery versus engaging in meaningful creation and something they actually care about.
And given that, right, why don't they do anything about it? So are we conditioned to say, okay, I'm going to sit and just be, here's the curriculum. I'm going to give you the curriculum and, we're just going to slosh through this, even though I'm not invested in this and neither are my customers. We're just going to do this because we have to, rather than looking at the work and looking and saying, let's invent some new stuff, right? Because the fifth page that's here, and there's tons of, if you want to go and actually read through everything, um, I mean, it is very interesting and easy to read stuff, but this is an interesting thing. I'm going to move us over a little bit so we can have people actually read that. There we go. So framework is interesting. So systemic properties, design resources, design quality, and the result for customers. So if we look at those four, and this is, I mean, it's interesting. This is being applied to school, but this could be applied to any number of industries or ideas because I think that's one of the great strengths of Schlechte's kind of framework here. All right. Systemic properties. So the properties of the system that we're working in. Beliefs, commitments, meanings, value, lore, traditions. There's also some structures inside there, the rules, the roles, and relationships. So if we look at
Superlative, by the way, was the word I was trying to think of.
So if we look at the systemic properties and we say, okay, let's get rid of the word systemic and say classroom properties, right? Everyone, whether they mean to or they don't, have the idea of beliefs and commitments, meanings, values, lore, and traditions permeates their classroom and permeates the way that they teach their course. I either believe my students are able to achieve what I'm asking them to achieve or I don't. I believe that if we go and say, hey, I'm going to build this project, the commitment from my customer is going to have them follow through with those ideas. We have a shared meaning of vocabulary in the classroom, like what I call you, what you call me, et cetera, et cetera. Your values come through. You might create mythology. I know I have the students build, they have their own brands and they have to build their own logos and stuff like that. And we create traditions. We have the teachers with the handshakes and the fist bumps and all that kind of stuff, right? Structures. Do you have jobs in your classroom? Do captains, all that kind of stuff? Are there auxiliary roles for other students? How do you relationship build in the classroom? So that's super important for any of this work to pop off, and those things to be defined and thought about, right? Design resource. Look at the variables that are there under resource variables: time,
Huh.
people, space, information. Those seem like, in terms of the 21st century pedagogy you want students to work for, if we're not considering those things, especially when we're going to have this temptation to revert back to previous iterations of education, if we're not thinking about time as not something that is, time is static, right? Not as, you only have 45 minutes to get this project done. Why are you putting conditions on things that don't need to be? Like, when do we, Webbs, in your job, do you say, hey, you got 15 minutes to turn this in, Webbs, and after that, like, I'm not accepting it?
No, I mean, it's interesting that you ask that because internally as a team, we've been talking a lot about like uh, how work moves through our team and what that means. And, is there like a time limit on how long you can work on a thing? And the only pressure comes from like in our heads. I mean, granted, we can't produce nothing,
Mm.
but also like if we're working in a reasonable amount of time, like then that's fine. Most of the pressure, and actually now this got has me thinking, like most of the pressure we've realized comes from internal, like this fear of letting our team down or letting other people down, and I wonder how much of that actually goes all the way back to school. And like if you don't turn this assignment in on time, then you're going to get a bad grade, you're going to have let your team down, blah blah blah, whatever.
I mean, look at some of the mental health struggles we've had online. Has been, you got 35 projects to do and it's due by this, and if it's late, I'm going to take these number of points off, or whatever. Not the quality of your work, not what you turn. It's if it was on time or if it was late, right?
There was a video a friend shared with me that was like, what your high school teachers say your professors will be like. And it's like, your assignment must be turned in exactly 3 weeks from today at 5 p.m. It will be in 12-point font in Times New Roman, single spaced, not double. Don't try to single and a half me or you will fail. If you turn it in late by any more than 2 minutes, you will fail. If you try to contact me with too many questions, you will fail. And then it's like what your professors are actually like. And it's like this lady walks in with a bag of chips and it's like, hey, so I sent you the syllabus, but like, you don't have to read it or anything. Like, we'll go over it now. You know what? It's fine. It's fine. Anybody want some chips?
I mean,
Like, this is just so disconnected from what reality actually is.
and that is the entire problem, right? We're supposed to be college and career ready, college and career ready. But what you're actually asking me to do does not reflect any college or any career that is there. You are making up meaningless menial tasks in order to punish me. All right, space. The idea of, I can do work asynchronously, I can do work synchronously. There, space exists. I can do work with people who are not in the same time zone as me, not in the same house, not in the same class. It, access to information. What information is my professor or my teacher give me? What information exists on the greater internet where everyone's connected? All those things are there. And then we go to the technology situation. What tools are available? What processes can I use in order to access those tools or utilize those tools to do work? And what skills must I have some background in order to do all those things, right? So the design resource, and that's just not for your students, it's also for your teachers, right? These are things that teachers also must possess in order to do work in the 21st century. These are not optional skills anymore. These are required skills in order to design and invent work. If we cannot do the things that the 21st century is asking us to produce, how we helping kids be college career ready if, as I've heard from a couple of teachers, oh, as soon as I get back to the classroom, we're going back to pencil and paper. And you're like, okay, fam, really? Design qualities, content, and what's the other word that's there, Webbs?
Substance.
Not just throwing crap into the Google Classroom because I got to throw crap in the Google Classroom. What's the point?
Kale, not Pop-Tarts, people.
What is the point? So, content and substance, product focus. Why are we learning this garbage, and what am I going to produce with the garbage that you're telling me? I don't want to sit and just do some stuff to say that I did it. What are we building? Product focus. If we're not building a product, why am I here? Because I'm going to go back to Webbs. I don't think you sit in your chair and you code stuff just to code stuff. There is a point, right? There is a Webbs. Your contributions to the project will result in this product being made. Not we're just going to type on the computer all day and get paid, and then you're like, Webbs, did you get anything done? Nope. I coded a whole bunch of stuff, but I just like randomly practice stuff that I will never actually use.
I mean, it's like Mavis Beacon teaches typing. I did my JHJs all day long. It contributed to nothing.
And I got bored after like the fourth row of JHJs, and I was like, let me go play Xbox. And then my teacher got mad at me because I was playing Xbox and not doing JHJs, and then everyone's frustrated in the system. But organization.
Did you do your 15 minutes of keyboard warrior?
Yeah, and I learned a lot from keyboard warrior. Like, I don't want to ever type ever again in life. Organization of the knowledge. How are you if you're looking in Canvas? How are we building the modules? Do the modules build on one another? Are the modules in isolation so that I learn something that I never have to use again? Really thinking about how you set your course up to be relevant to your learner and be relevant to yourself, to be quite honest, right? Clear and compelling product standards. What am I doing? Why am I doing it? How am I going to learn? When you get 35, this is going to be important because you need to be able to do X, Y, and Z in a job like Webb's. You need to be able to, you're taking photographs because you're going to be able to go in, demonstrate to the world how you see your environment. You're making movies because you're going to show people that, how the potholes in your neighborhood still have not been addressed by the greater community. Why? Go ahead, Webbs.
Also, how do you know what complete is? I feel like this is actually really relevant to my job. And that is, we have to come to an agreement with our client on what complete is. Otherwise, we could be building forever, or you could change the requirements underneath your, if it's constantly shifting, how do you know when you're done? So I think that's part of it too, is part of the compelling product standards is like, what is finished? How do you know when to stop?
Number 5, my favorite one in this group, protection from adverse consequences for initial failures. So if I don't do it right, I don't get an F. If I don't do it right 35 times, I still shouldn't get an F. If I fail on the 55th, if I succeed on the 55th time, I should get the same grade as if I succeeded on the first time. And I think there is a punishment ethos that permeates K-12 where if you fail, you should be punished every time you mess up, rather than everyone's journey is a different one. Somebody's going to get in the 3rd try. Some people are going to get in the 17th try. Some people may need 135 tries. No matter how long it took me to be successful, I should get the A when I prove to you, if we're still doing the archaic A, B, C, D, whatever, I should get the A on the 135th time, just like you got the A on the 3rd time. Because my journey is my journey, not everyone else's journey. And I should get it as many times as necessary to be successful. It shouldn't be, okay, you take the test one time, you failed, and A. You get an F on that standard for the rest of the school year.
Somebody said, if I can take the LSATs as many times as I want, then I should be able to take my middle school biology quiz as many times as I want.
If you can take the driver's ed exam as many times as you want. And it doesn't, on your license, it does not say how many times you took the driver's ed exam, does it? It does not say, accomplished driver's ed the 18th time he took the test. It's just everyone gets the same license. And no one complains about that. No one says, I did it on my first time. I should get a special license that only first time people get. It's like, all right, cool. Everyone gets their license and we move on, right? And so if we can agree that things like the driver's exam, in which I am now taking a motor vehicle and conducting what could be a weapon to kill and hurt and maim people, that we don't put a special citation on people's exams that take more time than the first time to do that. Why are we punishing little kids for learning how to write their name or whatever else we're talking about, do multiplication or whatever, when they don't get it the first time? Silly. Affiliation. How do we build these group dynamics? We don't want people working in isolation, because people working in isolation, again, weird things happen in your own mind when you don't have kind of what Webbs was talking about before, being able to converse with other individuals about certain issues or ideas or whatever, allows ideas to better form than if they just live inside our heads by themselves. We also get
experiences, right? Like, I have different experiences than you do, than Taco Dog does, than, other people that we work with. And it's so meaningful to learn from those experiences. Like, I have a whole long list of jobs that I have had, and it has been so valuable to be able to pick and choose from each of those experiences to inform what I do going forward. But we can't share those experiences if we don't affiliate with one another and have like a brain trust of people to work with.
Big facts. Affirmation. So again, having a situation where there's a little love in the classroom, right? There's a little, hey, Webbs, you're all right. Even though it took you 755 million times in order to write the letter S on the screen, you're all right. Give me a high five. Let's keep it moving, right? That stuff is important for everybody to have someone to say, when I feel bad, there's somebody else in that class I can go to and we can, hug it out, or, high five, or send emojis to one another, or whatever it is. Kind of an important situation. And it's important that that's built into any coursework that we build. Discussion time, groups. You get an opportunity to stay with your best friend for a couple minutes and chat with them about stuff. Doing projects with other people. Like, I hate, we're just going to do a project, and, always, I try to do choice projects. If you want to do it by yourself, God bless you. Some people work well by themselves and they don't want to have anyone else's input, but you're still going to have I still try to build in the input for the kid to say, here's my stuff. I'm going to present it to the small group of people and they can give me some feedback on it. There are other kids that just like that camaraderie and discussing stuff and saying we could do more interesting things if we work together in order to build them. And they shouldn't be penalized for doing that either, right? You notice the word choice there, Webbs. It doesn't say choices, it says choice. To go back to the previous thing, choice is different from choices. Having an opportunity to say, look, we're going to narrow your ability to choose. And if you think about a lot of the game shows that are out there, whether it's cooking shows, baking shows, or whatever, they have choice, not choices. I give you some ingredients and then you got to make something, but it's not, you have all the ingredients in the world. You can make whatever. Nah, we're going to narrow those things down. That creative constraint allows you now to look at your experience, look at what the ingredients are telling you. Perhaps you might be able to build, and at the same time allow you still to have that creativity to do what you need to. But if you give someone infinite choices, suddenly people are wasting time making decisions. Novelty and variety, be weird. Do strange stuff. Don't do like the run of the mill. We're going to write the essay, because no one wants to write an essay. And not that essay writing isn't something important, that being able to construct your sentences so that they're compelling isn't something that we should have kids do. But if the default is write a 5-paragraph essay about why, that doesn't excite anybody. If I'm writing an essay in order to build a script for a movie pilot that we're going to shoot, that changes the dynamic of that project, in which I'm still writing the essay, but I'm writing the essay for a purpose that's going to be far more engaging and attractive to me than we write this essay, and then what happens with the teacher? Oh my goodness, it's Friday night and I've got to grade all these essays, and all I want is not you're creating work that you don't even want to grade. that you're not interested in for no reason?
One of my favorite job applications when I applied to be a curriculum developer at Aristocrat. Shout out to my folks at Aristocrat; they're great people. You had to submit a video on how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I think that's what it was. And my video was like this whole like sports center esque Olympics. It was like the Olympics of sandwich making. And so I had like a whole like newscaster's desk, and I had one costume I put on where I was the newscaster, and then I cut that together with this other one where I was like competing in like Olympic level sandwich making. It was so much fun, and I remember submitting that video and thinking like, well, I have either found my people or I am definitely not getting this job. Because I decided like I was just going to go for it. Like, this is who I am. This is the content I like to create. If you don't dig that, then I'm not the person for you. And I'm unapologetic about it. And I feel like kids should be able to do the same thing. This is my weird crap. This is how I learn. Like, either accept it or I'm not the person for
The
you.
dope thing about it was the creative constraint. You had to show the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but you could do that in any manner that you would like, right? So again, you had choice. You didn't have choices. You had a choice. This is what the peanut butter, and you could utilize anything you wanted to in order to do that. And that's pretty cool. That's a pretty cool job application situation.
Yeah. Along that same vein, I'm gonna, if you're okay with it, I kind of want to share the JPMU promotional video.
It's just one of I think there's the crown jewel of my video editing career is a JPMU deal. That
You
is
got to give a little bit of background on it.
so JPMU webs. Now our first like national conference was at iPad Palooza. That's what 2015. I want to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2015 iPad Palooza, and we go.
Oh, it might have been even longer ago than that. Might have been 2014, 2013.
It's been a while, and
yeah, it's been a minute.
We were thinking about what we were going to do. Excuse me. It was closed reading for supervillains was like the thing that we were on, and we come through and we're like, hey, what if there was a university for villains? Like, what if villains had to go? They attend college like everybody else does or whatever. And we came up with Just Plain Mean University, because there's and I use it in the end of the video. In the movie Payback, Mel Gibson is going to trying to get his money back, and there's a scene in which he takes his gun and he shoots this guy's brand new alligator suitcases. He said, "Man, that's mean. That's just plain mean, man." And so I was like, "Oh man, that's right. That is the name, Just Plain Mean University." And so did the editing. We got a bunch of voice actors to do stuff and whatnot, and put it all together and stuff. And I think the dopest part about that was that there was an actual person in the presentation that thought this was a real university.
Well, in fairness, we did present it from the perspective that we were failed villains, and we had gone back to get our degrees in remedial villainy, and we're now trying to recruit other people to go attend Just Plain Mean University. We had pamphlets that we were handing out as people came in. We had little black envelopes that we plotted around the campus of the event. And we were totally in character for like the first half of the presentation.
Yeah. It was
until
pretty
this dude raised his hand and was like, is this a real university? Novelty.
It was definitely like one of the highlights of our presenting careers. And it wasn't the best presentation. It was just hilarious that the gag worked. And it was, and that brings me to the last one in design qualities, authenticity, right? Like, you brought yourself, Webb's kind of mentioned that in the little peanut butter jelly thing. You brought your authentic self to your work. This is who I am. Love me or leave me alone. And that's respected, right? I mean, and I'm going to go kind of pop culture here, right? So there's been a lot of issues with the WAP video and the WAP performance at the Grammys, right? And That's the authentic them. You could turn it off. If you didn't like it, turn it off and go somewhere. But there are people who dug that, right? And so there's a situation where allowing people to have their own audience, even if you disagree with it, and saying, this is not for me. I'm going to go somewhere else and watch, Conway Twitty or whatever it was, instead of Megan Thee Stallion. That authenticity, and not to say we should have kids doing making WAP videos in school, but looking at kids for their own experience and saying, I'm bringing my experience to this project, and I shouldn't be uh, penalized for how I view the world. Go ahead, Webbs.
No, no, I'm good. I was gonna say, we have a Twitter for JPMU. It's still up, and we actually got retweeted by somebody from one of the like Ivy League universities because I think they thought we were a real
A
university.
legit university, yeah. It's
Yeah.
kind of scary, actually. So the results for customers, and that's quotation marks. Those are your students, right? For community and society at large. So not for customers, we're talking about like everyone outside of your classroom. What students learn is culturally significant and valued by the community and society at large. College and career readiness, right? That's essentially what that is saying. We want these kids to be prepared to be citizens. We want these kids to be prepared to be entrepreneurs, be contributors in a positive sense to our society. All right. For parents, students are happy. Students are safe. Students learn what parents believe they should learn. So having that conversation with parents, like, look, we want your kids to be able to do these things. Do you agree? Yes, we agree. This is what cool. Parents are happy. For the school system in total, students are engaged. Students persist with work, despite the fact that it might be difficult work. I still stick to it because I value the work because you've invented something that is attractive and engaging to me. Students learn that what teachers want them to learn. And yeah, that's the only kind of weirdly phrased one to me. Students learn what teachers want them to learn. What do you think about that, Webbs?
I mean, I think that goes. I think that actually goes contrary to some of what's being mentioned here. I think the sentiment behind it is like, um, you know, going back to like students are engaged in work and they whatever the teachers have invented is so engaging that they are fully committed to it. But I think there is a piece where the teacher also has to invest in what is the student interested in learning. Like for me, when I was in the classroom, student organized learning groups were like the greatest thing ever. It was based off of a TED talk, and I'm blanking on the name of the speaker right now, but if I find it, I'll link it. And basically, the idea being this: the TLDR was students generate questions. You give them time to research those questions. They create presentations. They present to one another. They get feedback. They iterate. They research another question. So it's completely driven by students and feedback to do this kind of loop of information. And that way they have a say in what they're learning. And it's not like, well, we're going to learn about the history of the sponge cake or something.
But I think also there are manifest functions to everything that are latent functions, right? And so to say that students learn what teachers want them to learn, well, okay, maybe, but there are a lot of unintended consequences, right? There are a lot of things that students are going to learn that the teacher didn't realize that students were going to learn, and there should be some space to say a latent function of this coursework was that this kid now became interested in this obscure thing that I had no idea was going to happen, and now this kid is very interested in why sharks have cartilage in their bodies as opposed to bones or whatever it is. All right, great. That was not an intended outcome for my unit. My unit was talking about something different. So accepting the unintended consequences of learning, as well as, oh my gosh, that kid really learned some stuff that I wasn't addressing, I wasn't assessing, I wasn't even intent on presenting to a student. Now this kid is really impassioned by a certain aspect of this thing that I thought was very minuscule and unimportant, but they really grasp on. Like the puppeting with Victoria Rose. Like, all right, cool. Perhaps there was a class in which she saw a puppet on the screen for a split second. It was like, oh, that's interesting. It had nothing to do with the rest of the content, but the puppet is the thing that engaged and entertained me and enraptured me and made me want to continue to invest time in perhaps dealing with what my future would look like. So I think
It
that's
was
something
Sugata
that's good.
Mitra And I shared the YouTube link to his TED Talk.
Excellent. And for students, interesting work, challenging work, satisfying work, I think that works totally, right? So we want the kids to go and say, this is weird and strange and is engaging to me. I don't want it to be so easy that I can get it done very quickly, and therefore maybe I don't value it as much. So I want it to be challenging, and I want at the end to sit back and say, man, I just did something really dope, and I want to share that dope thing that with whoever else will deal with it, right? So um, I think if we start to go in and look at our work from that perspective, Webs, whether it's analog, whether it's digital, whether it's a blending of both of them, we start to look at it from that way. The teacher doesn't have to be the engine in the classroom. The students will be the engine as long as the teacher puts down the tracks that they can follow. And it kind of to the what you said at the very beginning, we don't want is the idea that you doing your job efficiently is a demeaned concept, right? Like if you're still working in year 18 as hard as you worked in year 1, we have to sit down and reevaluate what is the workflow? Why is that workflow still taking you as much time as it took you in year 1? And how do we go and make that workflow more efficient and more efficacious? Because if it's not, this is one of the reasons why a lot of teachers are getting burned out, leaving the profession. You have this constant, longing for more people to get into this. I mean, that and a number of other issues, financial and whatever. But that is definitely something that's contributing to teacher burnout.
I think too the inability for a teacher to partner on a regular basis. Like I think every teacher should have a partner, because how can you possibly be aware of what your own biases and blind spots are if you don't have another person observing what you're doing? The reason that I pair with my colleagues is that we can contribute our observations to each other. I have regular meetings with my colleagues to be like, okay, what can you tell me about what you've noticed about how I work? Because I can't see from the outside of me, and teachers don't have that. Like the only people that you see on a regular basis are your students, so they have to be the people who give you the majority of your feedback, and there's nothing wrong with that, and that can really help improve you as a person. But it also helps to have other adult feedback. And the nice thing about virtual learning is you have the ability to do that, to join each other's classes and to have students work asynchronously and make observations on what your content looks like.
And so to that very quickly, like Webs, one of the things that's not being done, unfortunately, is that Canvas has in it a way to collaborate. And it's not that we don't have people, we just don't use the tools that would allow us to be able to pair with another teacher. And I think part of that is the values of the system, right? The system doesn't value teachers working collaboratively because it views that as cheating, right? Why should I teach a group of kids in isolation? I shouldn't have to do that. That's silly, all right? So if we look at our Canvas here, you'll notice it says people right there. If I click that people page, yes, I don't really care about this. It's just a deal there. When you click the people, all right, cool. That's me. I can go and I can say, I want to add a person to this course. And I can add an adult, I can add students or whatever. All I need is their email address. I can tell their roles, all right? And this CCSD friends, you have a couple different roles. You have a sponge role and stuff like that inside there, but this is just some basic stuff. I can add a co-teacher to my course anytime I want. So if I wanted Webs to teach and have the same abilities, again, I had a conversation with a good friend of mine, and I was talking about why Webs and my partnership works so well. We have very few overlapping skill sets, right? We exist independently because we exist collaboratively. So there's things that I do not invest my time in because I don't need to, because Webs already knows how to do that. So why would I invest my time in certain skills where I could go and invest my time in skills that I'm already pretty decent at and improve upon, rather than let me go learn how to code. Webs got that pretty much covered, and it would take me years to get to the level. And by the time I got to the level Webs is now, Webs would be far exceeding that level again, right? So there's no point in me investing all the time and the effort to do that. If I found people with different skill sets than me that we can combine on a course, then suddenly I've become Voltron again, right? I use the Voltron cartoon as an example all the time because one of the constant ideas in that show is the lions are powerful by themselves, but they're not powerful enough to take down a road beast by themselves. They have to form Voltron in order to take down the big bad at the end of the show. And if the big bad understands if I take one lion out, they can't create Voltron, then suddenly the big bad can win, right? So the idea is who are your lions in your PLN that you can combine that I don't need to know how to build graphics on some kind of insane level because I have this person who can do that. Cool. So and so we can combine on this class. I need you to build all the graphics of the class. Webs, hey, I don't do the HTML thing. How can you build this core shell for us so we never have to learn the HTML? Or I can learn it at the when I need to rather than having to be fully versed in how all this works. You can build this course as a teacher, you can add teachers, as TAs, as a designer, and as an observer. So I can take the Canvas courses I'm thinking right now and saying, I'm an art teacher in the district. Why should I teach my art class by myself when there's hundreds of other art teachers that perhaps if we all collaborated on the course, something we all benefit from being able to sit and drink our coffee. But our system does not encourage us to do that. It encourages us to stay in isolation because the system is run in an inefficient manner. Absolutely and positively. But that tool is built into your Canvas CCSD, friends. Webs.
I got nothing.
So, look right now, and I'm not telling you to throw the rest of the school year away. That is not what, and I say this every year around January. August 2021 is going to be an interesting experience. There's still going to be a distance option for our friends who are in Clark County. So there's still going to be the potential that some of your students will not physically be in front of you. If I am you, I am going to teach as if no students are physically in the classroom. I'm going to have the Canvas course decked out, lined up, and ready to rock and roll, regardless of whether students are distance, in front of me, blended, whatever we're going to be calling this stuff in August, because the competency-based learning is coming soon. It is not something that you're going to be able to duck and dodge. And if you wait until the last minute, you're going to be in this constant catch-up mode again. Even if it's your first unit, what is your first unit? And you should have digital content already ready because you did it this school year. How do you take that stuff you already made and reimagine it, realign it, organize it so that it can be placed in the Canvas? Because, friends, Canvas is going to be the one ring next school year, or that's how you should plan for it. I got a couple friends I had to talk off the ledge. They were like, oh, yeah, well, you know what? We may be able to, plan like Canvas is going to be the deal because if they get rid of Google Classroom, you're going to be super screwed.
Yep.
All right. Webs, any closing thoughts, ideas?
Eat your kale.
Eat your kale. I like the kale chips. The kale chips have been.
Oh, kale chips are tasty. Crispy kale is delicious.
That's actually been a great addition to my diet. I do eat my pizza and stuff like everybody else, but I do eat the kale. I think the kale is worthwhile. But I
say that because I'm hungry.
Well, Caesar salad, I got a Caesar salad downstairs. I mean, that's going to be my deal today, even though that's not the healthiest of salads, but it's delicious anyway. That being the case, we will see you on Sunday or Monday Eve. We'll figure things out. Go to Schlechty's website, the Schlechty Center. Poke around. They have a lot of free resources that are there. The engagement ideas are really powerful. But that working on the work has been the thing that I've really dealt with. The other deal is, if you're looking for slide decks and whatnot, this is a book to go cop. Nancy Duarte, Slideology. This book is amazing. Even if you're pretty, I always thought of myself as pretty good with the design of slide decks and stuff. She has some very cool ideas here in Slideology that are, like you sit back and like, that's pretty dope. And that's something that's going to give me a little bit added edge in terms of how things are designed and whatnot. It's a great book, little pricey, but you can get it on the secondary book market. I got mine for like $20 or something like that. pretty good condition. You don't need a brand new book. This is the I don't know.
She has another really good one called Resonate. That's all about speeches and presenting information, which I think is also really good, not only from a teaching perspective, but if you are just trying to communicate with other people via presentations, it's a really solid book.
It's dope. And so if you like
So many resources today. We were all over the map.
you like pretty stuff too and making things pretty, that's something to deal with. We'll talk a little bit about some of the tools to make your Canvas course more streamlined on Sunday, because we want to avoid the vomit on pages, which kind of stops people from being engaged. Right? I have all this text and crap on a page. I'm not interested in reading all this text. Picture, a little bit of text. Picture, a little bit of text. Video, a little bit of text. Slide deck, a little bit of text. Boom, 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 boom. Far more efficient ways to get information to our user than I don't think I use any apps that are full of text and small pictures. Like those will get deleted off my phone very, very quickly. I don't want to read novels unless I'm going to a blog site. Blog site, cool. My expectation is there are going to be novelettes there. All right.
All right.
That's what we got for tonight, homies. Hopefully we'll see you Sunday. And like your weekend is a wonderful one. I know I'm going to sleep quite a bit because your boy's tired. Also, if I'm in the Clark County School District next year, I will be at middle school. So if you have any middle school fans of the show, I'm interested in doing some dynamic Canvas stuff in which like we really allow students to collaborate across campuses. So if you're interested in that, hit us up. I'd be interested in talking to you and seeing where we can mind meld. I'm going television production next school year if I'm at Clark County, but television production, a lot of creative work. And I want students to be making, but I'd rather them collaborate with people that are not in the room. I think that is the big push for next school year, is that we don't need to limit students by only the kids that happen to be in the room with them. All right.
Cool.
All right. That's what we got. I'm about to do the thing.